Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav Network. And joining me is a Houston sports broadcasting staple, longtime Astros broadcaster and author of the book, Astros Legends, which I just got. And it's just been updated in time for the holidays. So excited about this. And I want to welcome back Greg Lucas. And I can't wait to get into the new updated edition of your book, Greg. And I hope you're ready for some tough Astros offseason questions.
I am. The only thing I wanted to know, we're going to talk about this later. Second edition. Make sure you do that because some people who might order online, you got to make sure because their first edition is still out there too. So be warned about that. But yes, the Astros, disappointing finish, probably what they deserve based on how they played last year. And that's a question of coming back.
Yeah, definitely some big stuff we're going to talk about. Bregman is going on as we speak. Everybody's going nuts. And also, I just got to mention that today's show brought to you by MyBookie. Get in on the fun during the heart of the NFL season and early NBA action. Hey, you can usually find an edge or two early in the NBA season. So take advantage of that. Make a little cash for some holiday spending. That's always handy. We got a great deal for you too. MyBookie doubles your first deposit up to $1,000. That's a 100% deposit bonus. Look for the promo link and code in the show description. Your code, HST. You know what that means. Houston Sports Talk. Real easy to remember. But if you forget, all the information in the description, whether you're on YouTube or listening on the audio version. All right, back to the Astros. And Greg, before you and I delve into Astros offseason issues, were there any big picture mistakes that you thought Dana Brown or Joe Espada could have or should have done better, given the circumstances like the starting pitching injuries or the Jose Abreu mess?
Not specifically. I really blame mostly the players. You know, this team had the highest batting average in the league, 262, I think it was, but they didn't hit that well. You know, they hit terribly in the clutch. Their on-base percentage, which strangely enough was one of the highest, and yet it wasn't very good. I went in the 320s or something of that nature. So statistically, they were not as good as the numbers show they might be. I think they fifth in home runs. That's pretty high, but this team didn't come through in the clutch, as anyone who saw enough games knows. And when you don't come through in the clutch, you can get 2 hits in an inning, but if you don't get that third hit that drives in the runs, all that does is raises your team batting average. It doesn't do you any good. And that happened way too much. I think that bothered me more than any single thing. I thought that the management did as good as they could under the circumstances with the pitching injuries. And the young guys that came up, especially the two specifically, you know, they came up and did so well that we kind of forgot for a long time that there were some pretty significant arms missing, and Verlander was missing. And when he came back, he wasn't Verlander anymore. So I think to win the division, even though it was not a good division, to win the division was about as good as you could have hoped with this team. Oh, maybe beating Detroit, but they wouldn't have gone very far.
Yeah, and just speaking of the arms, maybe having the other arms wouldn't have mattered because most of these guys ended up pitching really well most of the year. But, Greg, I think they mattered in that you would have had some other guys that you could have put in the bullpen, giving you some long innings so you might not have worn out some of your back end relievers that I felt like maybe towards the end of the season weren't pitching up to what they usually do.
Well, they were more worn out than the starters, frankly, because the starters weren't going that deep. They were throwing enough pitches, but they were throwing their 100 pitches in 5 innings. And that has to be changed, certainly. But that's a problem in baseball in general right now.
All right, let's move to the major offseason conundrums, I'll call them. And Greg, I can't really argue with the Astros' general philosophy of not signing big contracts to their core pieces to big contracts, I guess I should say, going past 30 years old, outside of Altuve, of course. But newly minted Gold Glove winner Alex Bregman, much trickier for one simple reason. It's what he brings to the clubhouse. And by all accounts, he's turned around Hunter Brown's season, basically. Maybe his career with one of his suggestions as far as, adding that new pitch, journeyman reliever Taylor Scott, and maybe journeyman is a kind way to say it, said Bregman did his own scouting reports on pitchers. Bregman was telling his guys who was tipping their own pitches or constantly working on stuff like that. Taylor Scott, basically, it was a game changer for him, what Alex Bregman did personally. And then, Greg, this is the only guy Altuve has been vocal about keeping. So you add all of this stuff into the equation. In some ways, Bregman, is he more valuable than Altuve? I mean, does all of that information change how you look at re-signing Bregman or what he's worth?
I think they really need to sign him because of that very fact. And his value is so much greater than even his numbers. And his numbers turned out to be okay. And his on-base percentage was down. His average was 260, which isn't great. And it wasn't a consistent 260. As you know, at the beginning of the year, is well below that. But he ended up that high, and he hit enough home runs. But his glove, Gold Glove, and he's deserved it. We see him every time, the plays he makes, and especially some of the guys that had to fill in for him when he didn't play. You could see a major drop-off defensively right there, and those guys might have to be where the new third baseman comes from if he leaves. And so, no, I think he, of all the three, the two they did lose, Correa and Springer, and he would be the third. I think of the three, he probably would be the most valuable overall, although I must admit Correa probably would have developed into the same type of leader that Bregman is had he been here.
Yeah, Correa, you could call that more of an injury concern, potentially with Carlos. And, he's had his injury still after he left Houston, and, he didn't pass some physicals. So he was out of some money because of that after he left Houston. Also, we have to factor this in. The Astros would have plenty of money to spend on Bregman if they didn't make some mistakes and run into some bad luck. They're paying $20 million for Abreu next year, $11 million for Montero, $17 million for McCullers. And that's bad luck. And, he might come back, but I'm not counting on it. And then, this is just the price of, trying to get key guys in some of these runs. You're paying $12.5 million for Zach Greinke, which is deferred money. That's $60 million total, Greg, down the drain.
Yes, but that's not 5 years worth. That's maybe next year or the year after, and then it's gone. And so if you're signing Bregman, you're actually going to be talking about at least 5. And so for at least the last 3 or 4 of it, depending on what else they do, that money is available. So I like the concern of what his age will be, because as we know, ever since the PED era ended, guys aren't lasting as long at top level because the body just has trouble with it. But some do, and we just have to take a chance on that. I think his value, especially now, because this club still has the nucleus of a team that can win again, because they've got depth in pitching, even though a lot of guys have been hurt. When they all get back, there's depth there. And plus, with the new guys that came in, there's enough offense. They've improved the offense at catcher. They've, of course, Jordan's Jordan, Altuve's Altuve, and Pena is adequate and more than adequate at times. So they've got enough offense if they hit a little bit more in the clutch. But they have enough guys who can swing the bat. I think that the only concern to me, if I were the owner, would be length, only because of age, and it is. You would have to understand that in the last few years, you might have a guy that is not as effective, or he could be injury prone more. And that's just the way it is in athletics. What's more important? Taking advantage of this window that may still be open a little, or worrying about the fact that in 3 years, your team's going to be worse because everyone's going to be too old.
Yeah, I would have said maybe a year ago, oh, don't worry about Bregman. You can let him walk, except for a couple different things. We've seen the issues that they've had defensively with some of these young guys when Bregman hasn't been in the lineup. That's one. 2, like I talked about, this off the field stuff that he does. He seems like almost another front office guy that's playing. And we've also seen, which I didn't even mention, he goes to the minor leagues and helps guys when he doesn't play. So you can go, oh, yeah, he missed his time, but then he'll go to the minor leagues and be like another manager down there and another brain and do that sort of stuff that we didn't see Justin Verlander doing and some of the other guys doing when they were hurt and out. And then the other thing with Alex Bregman is it's such a key position, Greg, third base, whereas I don't care if Kyle Tucker walks because outfielders are much easier to find. Yeah, I'm going to miss what Kyle Tucker brings in the regular season. But another reason I just put more value on Alex Bregman is he's been a postseason player, and Kyle Tucker hasn't.
Well, and just think of the outfielders the Astros have had that they discarded and did pretty well. JD Martinez was the first because he took some hitting instructions in Detroit that he kind of maligned here, and they paid off, and then he had a good career after that. And the Dodgers left fielder this year was an Astro. I won't say they traded him, so they got something for him, but it was a guy that they let go. And so, yeah, I Bleav you're right. I think outfielders can be developed a little bit more. I'd like to keep them both, obviously, but you're doing one at a time. This year, it's dealing with Bregman. He's not going to find a place where he fits in any better, especially as a veteran going somewhere new. He is a Mr. Astro, and he really needs to be here. But as we know, judgments are made not just on sentiment. The Altuve thing may have been partly that, because he got a long extension, and he will be 34, 35 years old when it's up. But that's about how far they should go. And Bregman wants more than that, and that supposedly he does. And if he does, with guarantees, then it will be difficult for them to sign him.
Yeah, I'm okay at this point, giving him maybe 5 years, 150, which is one of the rumors out there, 150 to 200, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm okay with that. And just moving forward a little bit on this, Greg, I wouldn't trust Shea Whitcomb defensively as a third base replacement. He's only played 21 minor league games there. Bryce Matthews appears to be the best option. Yes, he's a shortstop who's only played 21 games at third in the minors, but Bregman was a shortstop who'd only played 13 games at third base in the minors. DeCenzo's the other option. He started 119 games in the minor leagues with 18 errors. How do you feel about possibly replacing with one of those guys?
Well, Matthews might be another year away, but I think that Whitcomb is the one that probably would get the first shot, but they've got to really work with him a lot during the offseason and during spring training defensively. The one thing he has going for him is he does fit the mold of the kind of hitter they want, guys who don't strike out that much. DeCenzo strikes out a lot. And even Whitcomb, though he didn't have a great batting average when he was here, if you look at his strikeout totals, they were pretty low. And they really want guys that don't whiff. And he might have an edge there. But again, if he can't play the position, and he had one horrible game, as you remember, playing third base, they have a big drop-off. But a lot of that can be corrected if you just work hard enough at it during the offseason and during spring training. I mean, you take more ground balls than you can stand, and more options and more plays and short hops. But I think if he leaves, I think if Bregman leaves, Whitcomb probably gets the first crack at it, barring any kind of a trade. And I don't think the Astros would make a trade at that position. There are other places they might make trades.
Yeah, if, for instance, Bryce Matthews isn't ready, it seems to me that the best first base upgrade potentially is Shea Whitcomb, because DeCenzo has played a lot more games at third base, and they need a first base upgrade as well, with John Singleton as not being probably what you want to go moving forward. I was most impressed with Whitcomb's bat, like you talked about, and you have to think the addition of third base coach Paris Chica might be able to help Whitcomb and DeCenzo. It seems like maybe that's why they brought him in, because he turned three players into Gold Glove winners, Greg.
Yeah, Gary Pettis was an outfield guy, and they needed more help work. And that's a good point. I may have had a lot to do with it, because he's more of an infield instructing type guy. And that's what they definitely need. Those two players you mentioned. I'm not sure they won't try to acquire somebody to play first, but it's possible. As I say, my negative with DeCenzo was he struck out an awful lot, both up here and during his time in the minors. He had good hitting numbers, but he was kind of, now I'm not comparing him to Judge, but I'm saying Judge struck out 170 sometimes. And so, he made up for it when he didn't strike out, but most guys aren't going to be able to do that. Personally, I would think that would be one position they might be looking to make a deal for somebody with a little more experience, but I'm not sure they would do that at third base.
All right, we're going to get to Kikuchi in just a second. We're going to get to the book Astros Legends. But first, just a quick reminder to our audience to join us for our live Texans-Lions postgame show right after the Sunday night game. We do it every Texans game. We go live. We need your comments and questions. And, of course, share your Astros thoughts in the YouTube comments and click the like button to support us. If you haven't done so already, click the subscribe and notifications on YouTube so you get updates on our new content. Of course, subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can listen while you're out and about. All right, Greg, the Astros have 4 spots in the rotation going into next year. Fromber, Hunter, Blanco, and Arrighetti that look fairly solid. I'm going to assume Verlander's gone. Garcia and McCullers are found money if they can pitch at all to start the year. do you sign Kikuchi at the right price? And if so, how much is too much for him?
Well, at the right price, yeah, I signed him. He was a revelation. The Astros found something. Most of the fans were saying, "What's this? A 4.75 earned run average left-hander is just kind of middle of the road guy." Well, he wasn't that with the Astros, and they made some adjustments. That it's the old story, and I'll go back to Martinez years ago. It's the same old story. Sometimes a change of organizations. You get to the right organization, you got the right coaches, you got the right ideas, and ding, the light bulb goes off. And I'm not sure if we give that all to the Astros pitching coaches and scouting staff, but they did something with Kikuchi that made him a top of the line starter. And yes, if the money is right, and remember, he's a little older, so he's not going to be getting these giant dollars comparatively, but he also will have value to a lot of teams. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Is there a little creative financing the Astros can do to open money for Kikuchi or Bregman? And what I mean by this is it's likely around maybe $4 million that Urquidy's going to cost you, who's arbitration eligible. You likely might not see him again. They can let him walk. And that major money I'd like to open up with Presley's money. Presley is making $14 million this year. The vesting option kicked in. I would trade him for a minor leaguer just to open up that money. And even if you're getting a warm body, I'll take it back for Ryan Presley, who I think just isn't the same guy anymore. That's $18 million, Greg, you can open up for potentially Kikuchi. Maybe you might need it for Bregman, whatever. But, some of these guys that are money that maybe overpaid or you don't need, or you need money elsewhere, I would think about it.
I would think about the creative financing by making deals. I think you could even theoretically, now this would be a big one, but you could theoretically trade Framber before he becomes a free agent. He would bring you a lot from somebody. Now, would he bring you enough? Would your loss of him for the 2025 season be disastrous? Maybe, but it's something to think about. Because he will become a free agent after next year, along with Kyle Tucker, and very unlikely that both are back, simply because of the same reason on a higher level why Soto going back to the Yankees is not very likely, even the Yankees, because of the money level that he's going to require. So it may be on a different level, but it's the same concept. You can't afford everybody, and in many cases, you're better off if you can't. But you've got to have bodies coming up to. You got to have Arrighettis that show up and within just a few starts find themselves. The Hunter Browns, after a struggling start and kind of a nothing year before, all of a sudden he finds himself. That's what you've got to have, and you won't know that until you have to put somebody out on the mound.
Yeah, according to Spotrac, it's around 18 million. Maybe he's going to be making quite a bit more, Framber. But the deal with Framber, though, Greg, is if you get rid of Framber, he's an innings eater, which could cost you in the bullpen. So Ryan Presley, you get rid of a guy that's maybe not that great in the bullpen and not helping you too much. And maybe even if you lose him, keeping Framber makes your bullpen shorter anyway. It makes them have to eat less innings, right?
Right. No, that's true. The way the game is played now, you've got to have a bullpen. I'm sad to say that because I don't really like the way the game is played now, but the way it is, you have to, because starting pitchers just can't go. 100 pitches is a magic number, and for years they didn't really pay any attention to it. But at the same token, guys weren't going very much over 100 when they pitched complete games, 120 maybe, and that was a complete game. And now, if you let them go 120 pitches, they might get you to the seventh. That's about it. And that's just the way the game is played now, with higher velocity, more foul balls, more pitches thrown. And there's nothing we can do to turn the clock on that.
What about center field? They can definitely improve off of Jake Myers. Dana Brown loves Jacob Melton. The former second-round pick has a solid, although unspectacular, 250 average, 774 OPS in the minors to this point. But he's one of their best prospects. I mean, what do you do here?
He's got to hit, and because that's the whole thing with Myers. That's why Myers is shaky, because Myers is a very good defensive center fielder, but he's shaky because he hasn't shown that he can hit it. He's shown that mostly he can be pitched to. I think that's better the way to put it. He can be pitched to, but if the guys in the minors can't hit better than that, then they're just in competition. They're not necessarily going to win the job. I don't put a lot of stake in minor league numbers as transferring to the majors, but I do put a lot of stake in minor league numbers as giving a guy a chance in the majors, and then it's up to him.
Yeah, one of the things that you look at with Jacob Melton is, the potential's there. He hasn't been down there that often, so perhaps he can improve, even if his OPS or it's somewhere close to where it's at. It's better than Jake Myers, and you would hope there's maybe more of a ceiling with him. He's got a more ball hit bat type thing going on, I think, the Jake Myers, Greg, and that's something that you have to look at too.
Well, you do, and really, you're talking about spring training. Here's the deal: if he had a great spring training offensively, because they know his defense is good, then he's in competition for the job. And if Myers has a bad spring training, then yeah, somebody else could win the job, because Myers doesn't own that job based on his offense. There could be competition for that job. The only thing I caution is that you don't know necessarily that the new guy is going to hold the job. But you really don't know if Myers is either, because if he doesn't hit any better than he did this year, he won't hold the job.
Well, things are happening as we speak, which I kind of figured, but we're right at the beginning of all this stuff. And Jose Urquidy is now officially a free agent. The Astros have let him go. He was outrighted. So that takes care of that money. Also, the Astros are going to lose Seth Martinez. He was claimed by Arizona. So there's a couple less arms in the organization. It's pretty interesting. And you and I were talking also about Kyle Tucker a little bit earlier. I assume there's no way they re-sign him next year. He's more Bagwell than Yordan in the postseason. Would you be open to trading him? I would much rather be open to trading him over Framber.
Yes, I would too. And the reason is partly what you said before. Outfielders can be acquired, even if you're trading him and one of the people in the package is a minor league outfielder. That means the other team knows that he might make it, but they know that Tucker already has. And so they're going to take the guy that already has, and the Astros are going to get the guy that might. Well, if it works out right, then the Astros are okay and they have saved a lot of money. But that really has to go into the mass overall thinking of the club as to how strong they think they can be in 2025. If they think they can be really strong, then they still aren't going to want to give up certain players. But if they think that maybe the die is cast and that 2024, even though injuries had a lot to do with it early, they're going to have a little downslide, then of course almost anybody is vulnerable in a deal.
Any other offseason concerns for you moving forward? I mean, there's some positions that I know people aren't like thrilled about. Jeremy Pena's hitting is not turning out to what you thought he might be as a hitter. Yainer Diaz behind the plate maybe isn't the best defensive guy, but I mean, there's going to be imperfections in a roster. You can't have all-stars everywhere.
No. And Diaz did well as a hitter, both when he was catching and when he was playing another position. I don't like him, and I don't like the two guys who do the catching both in the lineup at the same time, even if one of them is a DH, simply because it means if one of them is hurt, you've only got two catchers. That means you're in peril of losing your DH, if nothing else. I don't like that. So I would like something more at first base. Well, just, we'll see what happens in the spring. If they want to make DeCenzo a first baseman and he's in competition for the job and he's one of the two guys that comes on opening day because he earned it, that's fine. And same thing with whatever happens at third base if Bregman leaves. But then you just have your fingers crossed. You have to hope that they turn out to be major league players and not just guys, major league players who can really help a baseball team win. That's what the Astros would lose if they lose Bregman. They would lose a player, great player, but he also is a man who helps a team win. And that would be maybe a greater loss than him and his batting average and his home runs.
Yeah, I'm of the thought that if trading Kyle Tucker means you can keep Alex Bregman, I would do it because you can get outfielders. And I just trust Dana Brown to find outfielders. And I think that's another piece of this puzzle is Dana Brown is really good at identifying talent, especially young talent. So I feel better about trading a Kyle Tucker right now than maybe if we had another general manager and putting that money, the Kyle Tucker money, if you're going to trade him, I want it back into Alex Bregman and Kikuchi if possible.
Those will be the two I'd want back more than anything that are vulnerable. Those two. If they get one, that's great. If they get two, that's really good. And then you can start talking about, hey, we're back. We're gonna be content, and the holes we have, we're gonna fill them and be ready to go. Knock on wood, health helps us, and that's all you can hope for with that club.
Yeah, I was talking about creative financing. I would have, if this was possible, I would have thought about, keeping Montero somehow on the roster this year instead of letting that go. Because if you did and he's around, I would be willing to trade a decent prospect, not a elite prospect, but I would be willing to trade a decent prospect or two to get that money off. If it meant you could spend it somewhere else and keep somebody or add somebody that was really valuable, because I just think the Astros are kind of handcuffed right now with all of this dead money. I would have just figured out some way. There might have been a really bad team that goes, oh, you're just selling off prospects for us taking $11 million. Well, we can do that.
Well, the problem too with making acquisitions like the Astros did that turned out to be dead money was because they acquired veterans. Now, that applies to every other team too. If Bregman signs with someone else, who's to say that he doesn't turn out to be dead money much sooner than they want? But that's just the risk you take when you go after you. If you say, "Oh, this is a big name guy," the Yankees used to do it for years, and they've done it now. I mean, Rizzo, they did him, and he's leaving now, and Stanton, they did him, and he's kind of a one-way player. He had a good postseason, but they probably would do better if they had a more all-around player that wasn't so slow on the bases. But that's the price you pay to try to keep your team as strong as it can be, and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting offseason because Dana Brown's got some real gymnastics to do. But I do want to let's talk about your new book, Astros Legends, as it says on the cover, pivotal moments, players, and personalities in Houston Astros baseball. And I'd say, Greg, it's kind of 117 little chapters with a huge moment like Jordan's Game 6 World Series home run, or a player anecdote or story. Is that how you kind of frame what the book is?
That's how it was, and it includes the entire history of the franchise from the Colt 45s. The interesting thing was written for original release early in 1924, but there were some production delays, and it didn't really get out till late July.
2024, yeah, 2024.
It got out late 2024, but it was written through 2023, and it was supposed to be available earlier. But the funny thing is, and this is a bad thing, if I'd added anything from 2024, there's only one thing: Blanco's no-hitter. That's it. There was nothing else that would be an Astro legend from this past season. Now, I would have updated some of there's some statistical pages here, like Altuve's statistics have all gone up a little bit, his total number of doubles and hits and all that sort of stuff. And the team's overall record and Jim Crane's record as owner in little boxes. They would be updated, but that's it. Because this was not a year of legendary moments. There was a year of moments, but I wouldn't say they're things people necessarily want to remember because they didn't lead to a championship. They didn't lead to a big year. So consequently, in that regard, if you buy it, it's pretty much still the same. It's not, it's got everything that went through the 2023 season. The update part is because the first book I wrote closed out through the 2017 World Series and came out in 2018. Well, we've had 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So we had a lot of other years with things that had highlights that were added to it. The total number of total number of stories is tied into the total number of wins the Astros have had in their single season, including postseasons, 117. So that's what that means. The one that I think people need to read the most, because it's the one that the nation seems to keep getting on them for, is chapter 20, Astros 2017 season tainted by electronic sign stealing, because there was an actual guy in Houston that had videoed every single Astros home game that year. After the season's over and this thing started, he saved them. That's the other thing. He went back and reviewed every single one. He counted the number of times that the can was banged in the dugout. He counted the fact that it never banged when Altuve was batting. It's very like 2 or 3 times and then stopped because Altuve didn't want it. So that's true. It also has the story of exactly when it ended. It ended in September, early September, and it ended because that was a lower than usual crowd against the Chicago White Sox, and the bangs could be heard almost everywhere, including by the pitcher. And the pitcher of the White Sox got suspicious. He called his manager out. He called his catcher out and said, they're doing something here. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something. We'll change the signs. They changed the signs. And so for the rest of the game, Astros didn't know what was coming. And that also happened to spread around baseball then. The word got out, hey, change your signs. And the funny thing about this, Larry Dierker, months, years, maybe a year ago, he said all they had to do was change signs. And they did finally, but they didn't do it all that time before that. Well, they weren't hearing the banging. It was harder to hear when the crowd was large. It was impossible to hear in the World Series crowd, but they weren't doing it by then anyway. That's the other point. The Dodgers in the postseason, the Yankees in the postseason were not harmed ever by can banging because they weren't doing it by then. The record shows it, and the players have said that. Now, were they still stealing signs? Possibly, but they were doing it the old-fashioned way, like getting picks off what a pitcher was doing with his grip, maybe the way the catcher shifted before the pitch. But that's not illegal. Only using electronic means is illegal. It was hardly the first time it's been done, and I don't know where I got this, but I got this from Sports Illustrated a long time ago. This is a long story. Okay, it was written by Tom Verducci in 2020. This outlines in detail almost every case of sign stealing in baseball history. Some were electronic. Some of these I mentioned in the book, but not nearly as many as were in this Sports Illustrated story. The point is, Astro fans and Altuve in general still have to hear all this BS, and they weren't doing it when it mattered. They weren't doing it against the Yankees. They weren't doing it against the Dodgers. They only did it at home because that's the only place you could use. You had access to a camera. And the bottom line, too, is in 2017, they actually hit much better on the road than they did at home. How about that?
Yeah, no, it's there's about a million things that I could say about it, but I think it's all mostly been said right now. One of the odder stories that you had in the book is a chapter called Mets announcer Lindsey Nelson works from ceiling. I had an idea where that was going at old Astrodome. They would, they were doing some weird stuff back then, but I still loved reading about it. Do you have a personal favorite story from the book?
Well, that one I just mentioned because it refutes an awful lot of the stuff. And it's also got other stories. It's also got the story of Joe Medwick refusing to take the signs after he got hit in the head with a pitch that wasn't what it was supposed to be. So he quit. Willie Mays wouldn't have help. And there were other players too. I think the ones from the older ones are interesting because most people don't remember them. How many people remember Don Wilson? Great pitcher, outstanding pitcher.
2 no-hitters.
But he died early of carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. No one knows exactly how or why. Some of the players have different feelings than others, the guys that played with him. I know Jimmy Wynn didn't think it was suicide, or he didn't think it was suicide. He thought it was that he passed out in his garage. The car was running because it was cold. The fact is he was a very, very outstanding pitcher, and the Astros fans don't remember him much. He would have been a Hall of Famer if his career had lasted. He pitched, 2 no-hitters. He's one of the 2 no-hit guys. That one interested me. And of course, some of the unusual stuff that is in the end of the book about some of the wacko guys that were on the Astros and the Colt 45s, had some funny stories. That was also interesting as well. But I think as far as great moments, I think nothing can beat the home run Alvarez hit over the center field wall. That could have been a walk-off. I mean, the Astros had to get him out in the 9th inning, but it was the same thing. And not only because he hit a home run, but because he hit it so far. I also think the home run that Altuve hit off of Chapman was interesting because I remember watching that. And I know they're all screaming and yelling, oh, the Astros stole the signs and all this stuff. Well, first of all, as I said, they weren't doing it in the postseason. But secondly, I knew what was coming watching at home with that at bat. And the reason I knew what was coming was because Chapman was having a lot of trouble controlling his fastball. But he had thrown a couple of sliders. They weren't very good sliders, but he got him over the plate. So he's got a situation with Altuve where I think he had 3 balls on him. And I said, this is going to be a slider. It was. That's what Altuve's thinking too, because he couldn't throw his fastball for a strike. He was throwing it high. It was all out of the strike zone. And he was getting strike calls on his slider, but his slider wasn't very good. it kind of floated over, and that one floated over and floated out. So that was another one that I remembered, because I remember watching at the time, seeing the pitch. I'm up there and I'm telling my wife, she doesn't care, but I'm telling my wife, he's going to throw another slider. He's not going to throw him a fastball. And he did, and it was gone. And that's the kind of thinking that goes into the game. And I like the stories where guys have either outthought the other guys, or out hustled the other guys, or just plain creamed the baseball like Jordan did in the World Series win.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people think about the Astros with a lot of memorable home runs over the years, but you include Billy Hatcher and Chris Burke and Marwin Gonzalez in Game 2 of the Dodgers series. Springer's World Series home run in that same game. You start adding them up, and they've had quite a few. I mean, yeah, in recent years, but even throughout the history too.
Gonzalez is a good one because, he had a great year. In fact, he led the team in RBIs in kind of a utility role. He was a Dubon with power, and he was one that did supposedly take the signs, the bang, bang, bang at home. Wasn't they bang, bang, banging in L.A., and that's where he hit that home run. So you got to remember that. He and Correa, they never denied maybe taking, paying attention to the bang bangs at home, and Springer and even Bregman. Altuve, however, his own teammates said he didn't want it, and he didn't get it. And of course, as I said, on the road, he did not have that same advantage. So, but the opposition that lost, it's just sour grapes. And we keep hearing them all the time.
Well, we have so many new Astros fans since this dynasty started. So not only is the book a perfect stocking stuff or a Hanukkah gift for a young or new Astros fan, Greg, but many of the players in the stories will be new.
And as I said, except for the no-hitter this year, all the no-hitters are listed, including the multi-pitcher no-hitters. Great moments statistically with some of the guys, that the top all-time Astro batting averages for their career here, top single seasons and all that sort of stuff. And, until somebody changes them or breaks them, they're still good. The one-loss record, this club, it took a long time, but this club over this last stretch, this last dynasty, 7-8 years, climbed over 500 franchise-wise. And there are not a lot of teams that are very far over 500 in Major League Baseball. Obviously, Yankees, Cardinals, and those teams are, and Dodgers, but their Astros are as well.
You still making some dollars if you're selling these other Astros books that you've done?
Well, because they can find I've seen the Houston to Cooperstown when that was still in Barnes and Noble. By the way, Barnes and Noble has, sometimes you'll still see these. This one's totally evergreen. This one's forever because it's about Biggio and Bagwell and their careers and the Hall of Fame. And the Astros Legends is also in Barnes and Noble, but it's like anything else. You can order it through Amazon, but you can also order it through Barnes & Noble if they're sold out or they don't have any more on the stack. But in the Houston area, you can still find this. I bought the first one when I saw it the first time just to see it. And if you order it, just make sure you order second edition, because there's another book that says Astro Legends, and it's still orderable too. So make sure you get the right one, because most everything that's in the first one is in this, plus about 30 or 40 pages more. So that's the selling plug for me.
And remind everybody again that the 117 chapters are representing 117 is what?
117 wins in a single season, including postseason. That's why we came up with that funny number. The number in the first one was 103, and that was, I don't know, based on the most in a single season, maybe. I think that's what that was. And so then we had to add some stuff. So that's the number that I've stuck with. No odd number, but they had a reason for the odd number.
That was the combination of the regular season and postseason from 2022?
Yes, 117 is, and the 103 was the top single season record. So that was how I did that in those days. But it was fun, and it's, as I say, it's a great thing to have on your reference shelf. It's, like the longest shutout in Major League history at the Dome in '68. That's in here, and then the multi-pitcher no hitters. Some of them have more details, like the 5-pitcher one in New York the first time against the Yankees, and the ones in the postseason, the one in the World Series, which is one of only 2 no-hitters of any kind in the World Series. It was fun doing, and it was a lot of work, but I had a lot of research material to deal with, and a lot of books to refer to and give them credit in the back. They all got their credits if I took anything at all. But I had a lot of fun with them, and I don't anticipate writing another. 4 is enough.
That's enough. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks again to our new sponsor, also MyBookie. Don't forget, they're going to double your first deposit up to $1,000. Look for the link and promo code in the show description. And also, I'm going to put up Greg and I's conversations when one of them we did when Jimmy Wynn passed away, and we did a tribute to him. We'd also did a tribute to Bob Watson. I'll put that link up at the end of the YouTube video, so look for it visually on the video. You can just click on it because if you're an Astros fan, and obviously you are because you're watching this, you'll love those conversations that we had on Jimmy Wynn and Bob Watson for sure.
By the way, I want to do one last thing. If you do have to order this somewhere, it's from Blue River Press and Cardinal Publishing. So if you have to, you'll go online and you need to know that. It's Blue River Press and Cardinal Publishing. They're out of Indianapolis. They're great people. They also distribute books from other people around the country. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you do, as Robert suggested. Get it for the holidays. It's a great holiday gift for any baseball fan, and especially Astro fans.
Good stuff. Astros Legends. Go check it out. Thanks again, Greg.
Thank you.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.